Hello, Vapor friends. This is Steinger, whose disembodied voice will hereafter be represented by a swirling circle thing. Vaporwave as a genre of music is notorious for the sheer number of subgenres within it, ranging from the fascinating to the slightly absurd, if we're being honest. Most of these will be pretty familiar to the typical Vaporwave fan, from the unnervingly upbeat tones of Utopian Virtual, to the haunting melancholy of Mallsoft, my personal favourite, to the grating buzz of a good signal wave album. This variety shouldn't be really too surprising. From a musical point of view, Vaporwave can be denominated both in a mechanical sense as well as an aesthetic sense, with many classic Vaporwave albums being as such more for their vibe than their construction. Some good examples are the albums Odyssey and 100 Mornings, both of which stylistically can probably be more accurately labeled as a type of synthwave or ambient than anything else, but the mood they give off and the tolerance for diversity in the broader vaporwave scene has led to them and many other interesting works to be claimed under the Vapor umbrella, and the scene, honestly, is all the better because of it. All of this can be combined with the fact that Vaporwave is a highly decentralized and democratized form of music construction, with many producers putting together tracks from their bedrooms. This flexibility from both a production, mechanical, and aesthetic perspective combine to make a soundscape stunning in its innovation and genre-bending potential. And that's what I want to talk about today. My top 5 Vaporwave subgenres that are either too strange, too obscure, or too niche to be included in any canonical list of Vaporwave subgenres, yet which go a long way to showing the sheer breadth of this fascinating area of the musical world. I'll also include at least one album recommendation and an associated link from each to get you started on your own journey into the trenches of the Vapor world. So, without any further ado, let's begin with number 1. Vapormetal. Combine the heavy, pounding drum beats, roaring electric guitars, and guttural groans of metal music, with the sample looping and fuzzy reverb of Vaporwave, and you get Vapormetal. As someone whose initial interest in music traces back to hard rock and its cousin genres like thrash metal, this is an absolute gem of a subgenre for me. Metal is all about distinctive licks and guitar solos, so hearing it chopped up and diluted through classic vaporwave filtering techniques creates this really interesting dissonance. You see, the aesthetics and culture of metal is often built around themes of directness, masculinity, and forcefulness. So, having it be completely eroded and hollowed out presents a really interesting subversion of the genre, a sort of ironic stripping of the central thesis of what metal music is trying to accomplish. It really feels as if the artists are desperately trying to, roar and make some noise. But no matter how hard they try, the sound just dissipates into the ether, like something from a daydream or a fever. It's especially interesting because, while sonically, metal and vaporwave, couldn't be more different, they're both very aligned in their kind of rebellious and anti-commercial spirit, which makes for a strange but genuinely fascinating mix of musical styles. To give an example of the subgenre, I'll definitely recommend Dreg Diamonds by the artist Dreg Diamonds. At just 13.5 minutes of what could so easily be a solid piece of metal music if played straight, but which has been so cooked up with fuzz and reverb that it feels completely alien and even a little bit lethargic. It's like putting on your dad's old bootleg Metallica cassette tapes from the 80s, but which have become so compromised by the ravages of time that each song feels like a degraded ghost of the past. Loud, impotent fury, signifying nothing. Ironically, there's something very metal about that image, which shows that even stripped of many of its mechanical hallmarks, the spirit of metal very much still haunts the works in this subgenre. Definitely worth checking out. And that brings us to number 2. Vaporchill. Ping-ponging wildly in tone from Vapormetal, we have Vaporchill. Vaporwave already has some ancestry in the chillwave genre, so it's not too hard to see why this combination has arisen, and just so happens to work so well. Vaporchill is like Vaporwave with its ironic and satirical edges sort of smoothed down a little bit. Many of the aesthetic elements are still here. You've got your Roman statues, your saturated pinks, and random Japanese characters proliferate across many notable albums in the genre. But whereas classic vaporwave tends to follow very much in the hauntological tradition, offering what can best be described as a rude awakening to the malaise of modern consumer society, Vaporchill largely has the opposite effect, instead offering relaxing sample loops and beats to send you off into a peaceful sleep, maybe while relaxing under a tree in a meadow somewhere. If I had to break it down, I'd say whereas classic vaporwave feels like it was made at maybe 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night, laboring feverishly under the cold glow from the computer screen, Vaporchill feels more like it was produced at maybe 11 a.m. during the holidays, while lounging in the sunroom or maybe by a beach somewhere, with a Long Island iced tea sitting comfortably by your side. Airy, bright, tranquilized, and totally relaxed. It offers a more laid-back, chill side of the vaporwave spectrum for those days where the melancholy of modern living has receded and everything feels like it's just going to be all right. In my mind, nothing demonstrates the virtues of this subgenre more than the album Do You Know Hammer Chillouts by the artist Hamachiratsu. 1 hour of the most relaxing, vibey music you could ever really ask for. Fully tranquilized while still retaining the core of vaporwave aesthetic sensibilities, this album is absolutely one to check out. I'll also give a shout out to Heatwave EP by Dot Casting, which leans much more heavily into the vapor side of the equation and gives a good example of the spectrum this subgenre can operate within. And with that we come to number 3. Vaporhouse. Vaporhouse is what you get when the hefty beat-driven progression of house music gets haunted by the vapor ghosts. So I guess you could say it's a haunted house. Anyway, more ethereal and floaty than classic house, but also more groove-laden than classic vaporwave. Listening to it evokes the feeling of kind of wanting to dance, except it's 4 a.m., you're tired as hell, and the abandoned warehouse you're in was vacated hours ago, so all you can do is shuffle back and forth as the beat slowly recedes into nothingness, like a heartbeat slowly dying away into nothing. It's interesting how, despite being extremely different in intent and aesthetic, many of the mechanical elements of both genres overlap in surprisingly coherent ways. Sample diving, looped audio cues, and a strong emphasis on sonic texture all predominate, making for a fun, if slightly rare, musical intersection. For albums that fit the mold, I have to recommend Illegal Street Racing by Misfit Chris, a fantastic assortment of beat-laden tracks that combine to make a coherent and cohesive soundscape. I also love the album art, which feels like it came from an alternative world where the stylistic intent of vaporwave exists, but took on a much more sleek, mechanical, and down-to-earth vibe than the maximalist aesthetic we ended up with. Now, although I'm not going to give it its own subgenre in this video, I would be remiss to not at least make a passing reference to the wonderfully named Vaporwave, which carries many of the similar tenets and philosophical backings of Vaporhouse, but ramps the BPMs up to 11, and gives an even more degenerate industrial feel. Huge shout out to Wasex's End of World Rave, an incredible piece of hard vapor, and one of the greatest albums to ever grace the broader vapor scene. And with that we come to number 4. Breakwave. Breakwave is the illegitimate child of the frantic, glitchy stylings of breakcore music, mixed in with the classic vaporwave signatures we all know and love. For those who don't know, breakcore is a type of hardcore electronic music with a hyperkinetic texture, complex drum patterns, and extremely high BPMs designed to send you into sonic overdrive. Similar to house, breakcore already has a lot of mechanical overlap with vaporwave in its sample-based construction and how it plays around with tempo, so a combination of the two is honestly a match made in heaven. Listening to breakwave is an exhilarating experience. This ain't your grandpa's vaporwave. You've still got the super tight loopings of absolutely god-tier earworms a la Future Funk, but sped up to 100 miles an hour with an often disorienting and funky as hell backing beat and accompanying wall of sound. If anyone ever says vaporwave is just for listless, melancholic teens, blast some of the glistening, overlapping surge of breakwave and you'll soon put even the most cynical of vapor haters to shame. For an album rec, you can't possibly go past Breakwave Paradise by Astro the Fox plus No ID. I mean, come on, it's literally where I got the name of this subgenre from. Just under 12 minutes of high-octane chip rave goodness, featuring a wild assault of crazed and sometimes haunted samples, including refrains from funk gods Casey and the Sunshine Band, and even some 3D Space Cadet pinball to take you right back to the late 90s where you belong. Honestly, a really well thought out and executed album that deserves way more attention than it is received. It will definitely challenge some of your notions of what vaporwave adjacent music can be, but go in there with an open mind and maybe some of the more intense future funk albums as a reference point, and you'll be in for a great time. For something a bit longer, I'd also suggest Welcome to the Vaporwave, which at over an hour long offers one of the more ambitious visions in this fascinating breakwave genre. As mentioned before, links to all these different albums will be in the description or the comments below. And with that, we come to number 5. Vaporchips. Ending off this list, we have a subgenre of vaporwave which leans much more heavily into its conceptual framework than the other ones in this video. I call this music vaporchips, that being vaporwave music designed to be the soundtrack, essentially, to a fake video game. Now, the relationship between vaporwave and video games has always been very strong. Many old game soundtracks have been intensely influential in the scene, or at least highly evocative of the vaporwave vibe. This includes Echo, Songs of Time, Pilot Wings 64, and especially Autumn of Wind, which is this insanely niche PS1 era Japan exclusive game with a soundtrack eerily prescient of the vaporwave sound that would follow it over a decade later. I mean, come on. The soundtrack features the art of Hiroshi Nagai. The vaporwave future funk aesthetic connection is about as clear as day on this one. Also, as a fun fact, I actually have a signed copy of an old Nagai print called September Wind in my living room, so I absolutely love this aesthetic to death. Anyway, this connection would follow with extensive use of sampling of 80s and 90s era music in many vaporwave tracks, and even entire albums built around a video game story or aesthetic. Mesh's Welcome to Warp Zone and Polygon Dreams' Zelda Wave probably being the most obvious examples. So, the history and framing for Vaporchips is embedded pretty deep within the DNA of vaporwave music as a whole. All it took was the gumption of some ambitious music producers to take these aesthetic forebears and run off into the sunset with them. What's so cool about Vaporchips is that in terms of musical style, it can be pretty much whatever you want it to be, so long as it suitably evokes the era, genre, and console of the game that you're trying to emulate. Now, the Vaporchip album I particularly want to highlight is My Island Tycoon by Color Advance SP. It's a little obscure compared to some of the other albums in the subgenre, but it is, in my mind, a cohesive masterpiece. Made for the eponymous and of course entirely non-existent game on the also entirely non-existent SNES 32, the tracklist accompanies all the possible situations and events on your own little island simulator, from the second track file select to various tracks that, based on their names anyway, would trigger based on your island's population. It's a wonderful piece of cozy ambient music that really feels suited to building up your own little island in the virtual world. Obligatory shout-out also to Equip's I Dreamed of a Palace in the Sky, which sounds like the soundtrack from some 90s JRPG never released outside of Japan. Both are definitely wonderful introductions to the Vaporchip aesthetic and soundscape, and I highly recommend checking both of them out. And that just about wraps it up. Look, obviously designating entirely new subgenres of vaporwave music is a bit redundant. Realistically, most albums could comfortably be put under maybe 4 or 5 different umbrella categories. But there's something very fun and very human about sussing out new and exciting soundscapes and giving them their own label. Sometimes giving something its own name is enough to get people interested in new possibilities and start off a trend of sonic exploration. At the very least, if you take one thing away from this video, it's that vaporwave is so much more than just the classic floral shop Macintosh classic era. Vaporwave in my mind operates more as a transformative siphon through which otherwise stale sounds or aesthetics can be reinvigorated with strange, surprising, and dynamic new textural possibilities. There's so much creativity and originality out there, and if you go looking for it, there really is no limit to what you can find. Thanks for watching, Vapor Friends. This is the first long-form video I've ever really done about anything, really. It's really more of an experiment just to play with getting a single project out there and sharing my opinion on something. I actually have a way longer and more, let's say, academic video on Vaporwave sitting in the wings. The script has been completed for honestly like a year now. I just need to get off my butt and put the visuals together for it. So if you're interested, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment about your favorite weird Vaporwave subgenre. I'm still pretty new to this, so I'm sure I'll respond to whatever you post. And yeah, I'll catch you all next time.